farm without inputs, without going to the feed store. How can we do this cheaply? So our farm is called the Sow's Ear, because I don't know if you guys know, I hope you guys know the Sow's Ear and the Silk Purse. And as we were doing our place, and we would say, okay, well, we're going to go this way, or we're going to go this way, we would say, we're going to go the Sow's Ear way. We are not going the Silk Purse way. So most of the things that we do on our farm are the Sow's Ear way. We have personally on our own farm, so we live, these were terms that we learned, we live in a holler, okay? And
you spell that H-O-L-L-O-W.
That's right, holler. And so we own about 24 acres on our home pasture, and that about 5 of that is usable.
About 7 of that is pasture now with the new place.
Okay, and then the rest of it is very steep hillside. And then just up the road is a Franciscan convent they have about 35 acres of pasture, and that's where we keep our dairy cows. So we have a micro dairy. We have sheep, pigs, and stuff primarily on our property, and then the cows are up at the convent. We raise 90 to 95% of what we eat and what our animals eat from the farm. Okay, so we are not buying in things, and that's what we've been about. And we have 8 children, so we've done a lot of feeding. Okay, so I think I've said, I think you're on.
So, just in case we're not all clear on the principles of intensive rotational grazing, right? And it's got a lot of names. People out there can be very particular about what name you use. I used the wrong name to a very famous holistic grazer one time and got stared down because I had used the wrong words. But what we mean is, and it goes by a lot of names, mob grazing, eye grazing, strip grazing, intensive rotational grazing, lots of words. But what we mean is temperate paddock, small paddock, high impact, short duration, long rest grazing. Basically, we're going to crowd animals onto a piece of land that's holding the amount of forage plus some that they will eat or trample in the period of time we're putting them there, and that's going to be a short period of time. We're going to move them, and then they're not coming back until that land has completely recovered appropriate to the season that you're in by the time you come back. So this is grass that's being grown, pruned by moving 4-legged pruners. We're going to yank it, bite it, pull it up, poop on it, pee on it, stomp it, and then we aren't going to bring it back until it's completely recovered. Now, part of why that works so well, this is biomimicry. This is what happens and still happens in the wild in any ecosystem where your grazing ruminants or your grazing animals are in large herds and you have enough predators to keep them moving. You've got grazing animals, predators pushing them around, they bunch together, the grazing animals bunch together for security, and anywhere they've been looks like you've just mashed it. So they have to keep moving, and they don't come back until it's done. What happens? So when this is just your fast science, I won't give you very much of this, but as our pasture plants, whatever they might be, and the more diverse they are, the better off for all of us. This is not like pretty Timothy and clover and you know, a bunch of grass and a legume kind of almost monocultural pastures, but very, very diverse natural pastures. But as those plants grow up from the soil surface and they're putting on height and bulk, their root systems are putting on corresponding bulk down here, sometimes miles literally if you cut it all off and lined it up of root mass. When it's pruned, the roots die back to a size that is supportable by the amount of plant that's left. That leaves a whole lot of organic matter under the surface of the soil, which is going to rot. It's going to feed microbes, it's going to feed fungus, it's going to feed bugs and worms. It's going to leave holes down in the soil, and they're going to do 3 things. They're going to let water down, they're going to let air down. Our roots need air and water. And they're going to make new passages for the next sets of roots so they can grow further, faster, longer, bigger. So we're actually building soil underneath the surface of the ground. We're putting organic matter down where it needs. We're mining minerals, whatever we're missing on top because the topsoil is washed or blown away, because we cropped it and we taken minerals and shipped into the city, wherever that's gone. Now we're mining minerals with our very diverse plants up here that have all sorts of different kinds of root systems. Mining them, bringing them up to the top, instead of cutting them off and shipping them next door where the guy next door can feed them to his cows because he's buying your hay. We're gonna mow them right there with these living mowers. They're gonna mow it, and out the back end is gonna come in the course of a year, out of the back end of a cow might come 11 tons? I don't even remember. A whole lot of manure comes out of the back end of a cow. In the meantime, they're also gonna be doing some nitrogen-rich irrigation for you, and they'll stomp what's left so that that top stuff does two things. Now it's down on the soil where it's going to rot faster, but it's also keeping your soil cool. Next time you come back, each successive time you come back, you're seeing more organic matter, soil that's staying cooler longer so your plants aren't going dormant. You're building more plant on top of the soil, and that's what we need to harvest with our animals.
Okay, I'm gonna go back for just a second because I should have. Okay, so this gives us information about who we are and where we are, and we have a blog out there. We also have a book, which is down here, that helps explain what we do. So we're gonna only be able to give you some. The book is a possibility. We also do workshops at our farm. I know we're a long way off, but we do have somebody coming in from Oklahoma that's going to be doing a workshop with us. So if you're interested in that, we have a workshop sign up down here. We also have cards. Our business cards are down here, and you're welcome to take that. One of the things we love to do is answer emails, especially my wife. She's really good about answering emails. She has a world of information that works inside of there that she's able to answer all kinds of questions. So don't hesitate to email us and ask us, because we like to do that. One of the things that we wanted to point out, is what rotational grazing is not.
Oh, right. And if we can forward this picture. There we go.
Okay, this is what rotational grazing is not. It's not turning animals in on an area until they've destroyed it. Okay?
If you can see dirt that you couldn't see before, you probably hit it too hard.
Rotational grazing is that, as my wife was saying, it's moving them around. Okay, so anytime that you're doing the other, which is just the conventional grazing and just turning them loose and letting them live in that is not very good practice. So.
Although I'm going to make the point, I just want to say this. Anytime you are practicing conventional grazing, you have a big pasture, you've got water, and you can turn the animals in, you come back and check on them every Saturday or something. If you can just divide it in half and give them month on, you're giving those plants some rest. Now, if you did that daily, you'd actually not be making anything any better. But if you can, give those plants a rest period, any amount of that you can do is better than not doing it at all. So if you've got 4 pastures and you're moving around, you're doing good stuff. In this environment where the rainfall tends to be seasonal, the ground tends to heat up, you're not doing nearly as much good as you could be doing if you're out there moving your animals more regularly. So I have these 2 slides for people who maybe keep a garden and have a small homestead and are asking themselves, do I really want to get into this animal grazing thing? Like, how important is this? So this is my example of a 2-acre mini homestead with a 10th-acre garden, which is a pretty big garden for a small family. Down here, where you probably have stuff in your garden maybe 9 months of the year, you're harvesting maybe a 20th of your sunlight for maybe 9 months of the year by eating from your garden. Now, we're looking at how much of your sunlight you can be harvesting for potentially 12 months of the year if you're grazing. Bioenergy is solar energy. There isn't anywhere else we've got energy for any living thing to come from. The only things on the planet that can capture solar energy, solar cells, is plant leaves. Plant leaves are monocultures, and plant leaves that we decide need to be there don't necessarily thrive, but what's growing there or what will come in naturally will set plant leaves at every height, at every angle, at every shape, and of every size. So that if you have a good sward of growing plants, you could actually put them a photon receptor thing, little thing that would show you how much light's getting down to the soil level, put it down there, and it wouldn't beat very much because not very much sunlight is actually reaching soil level. Your plants are harvesting those. We as human beings who want to live here and be happy here and like introduce our chosen species, like cows and pigs and sheep and chickens, need to figure out how we're going to harvest that sunlight in ways that won't degrade the land's ability to go on capturing that sunlight for us. So basically we have to live with our chosen animal species in ways that make plant species happy so they'll keep catching sunlight for us and we can harvest it.
One of the questions that we are asked was, who should be grazing? And we would say everybody should be grazing. Everybody should park their lawnmower and get a goat or get something and start grazing that property that you have, because it is making the soil better. And the other thing that we love is you're already creating food. And we love if you're grazing something that you can milk, because we are big on the milk coming into the farm. It is a daily intake of food, and every farm used to have a milk cow.
Or 2 or 3 or 4.
And so we milk, hand milk, and we have a very small, we have a micro a dairy, but we then bring in 3 or 4 gallons at least a day. Most of that is drunk at the table. We love it, but then Beth makes cheese and sour cream and butter and all the other things, and we feed the animals a lot with it. So the milk cow is really a fabulous, or the milk ruminant is really a fabulous thing, and we think everyone should be grazing and everyone should have a milk ruminant.
And before you decide dairy isn't for you, this is not conventional dairy, and it doesn't have to be the every 12 hours prison that people who grew up with conventional dairying have experienced milking to be. So this is not a talk about dairying, so we won't bore you with how important this is, except I will say there's one way you can turn that sunlight into proteins, fats, and sugars for the whole, every omnivore on the farm plus all your calves, turn it into food energy in real time every 12 hours is with a dairy animal.
However, if you are interested in dairying, catch us sometime and try and get us to stop.
That's right, try and shut us up.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the equipment that you need for rotational grazing. And what you would find if you went to a lot of the rotational grazing things, they say, okay, well, here's all the list of the things that you have to have. Well, you absolutely must have high pressure water system. You have to have high tensile perimeter fences. You have to have pasture mixes. You have to have a tractor with a disc and drill and sprayers and all those kinds of things. You have to have a four-wheeler.
No, he always tries to get them.
Four-wheeler you do need to have. But all of those things that they're going to tell you you have to have, you do not have to have. Okay? The equipment that you need to have is something like this. Okay? So this is a solar charger. Okay? Now you can either use chargers that are solar powered or that are plug-in. Okay. Now Joe is probably going to come over here next talk, and he's going to talk about this equipment more. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. I just want you to know that this is easy to do. Okay. So you need a solar charger, and then you can have a battery set up or a solar cell set up, and then there's a whole series of different posts that you can use. Now, what we use for perimeter fences, people use these high-strength, so we use rebar posts, metal rebar posts that we stab into the thing with, at the corners where we're turning, we'll often put in a T-post, okay? And then we use insulators, and we use 14-gauge wire. That's our perimeter fence. It is not a perimeter fence, okay? I mean, it is not closed perimeter fence. The sisters at the convent have to have the farm, have to have the driveway going in and out, so it can't close. And we love those cattle guards, you know, that you put across the road. And we could not put one of those in, it's too expensive. So my wife went and painted white
Everybody
lines
else
on
do
it.
that? Actually works if they don't see it too often. They see that black and white line stuff, they're like, I'm not stepping on that.
Yeah, so it seems to work. Okay, but we don't have, that's all that we have for our perimeter fence. Partly because when we went up to the sisters, one of the great things that's happened is we're going to only put in a certain amount of infrastructure up there in case, especially, I mean, we've been up there for years now. But when we first started out, because we thought they could decide they don't want us up there. and I need to be able to take everything home in 24 hours, okay? So that's how we did it, very slowly and gradually. We still don't have much up there. We have no internal permanent fences. That fence that we have that runs more or less around, the other thing that we do is we put that fence into the tree line. People say, don't put it in the, high tensile, you've got to put it in the pasture side. No, we put it into the tree line so that the cows can use that for shade, so they can get into it. Then also, when the trees fall on it, which happens a lot, it's super easy to just set back up, okay? So there's a lot of things that they will tell you that you have to do for rotational grazing that are intimidating and too expensive, and you don't have to do that. So these are really great. We definitely say do not get the posts that are at the TSCs and places like that, because what happens is they start to splinter, and then every time you touch it, you start getting splinters in your hands. So Premier, that's who Joe sells for. We really like Premier. There's a place out by us in Pittsburgh called Kenco. They get a lot of this stuff from Australia, New Zealand. That's where a lot of this started. And so get good posts. You're going to pay a little bit more for them, but it's worth using those. Now there's a lot of different kinds of posts that have clips on them, that already have the clips on them. Some of them that you put the clips on. Here's one that you snap the clip onto it. Okay. The thing that's nice about the fiberglass post is that it's not going to short the wire out. Okay, so you can wrap the wire around it, whatever. These are also just stab ends. Okay, so we found different stab ends that work. These work fine. Where we are, there are times when it is cold enough that we take out an electric drill. And you have to do that a little bit in order to make it
zero for a while.
That's right. And then one of the things you want to be careful of. Okay, and so here's one that's got all kinds of posts on it. It's got nice rigidity, so you could use this as a corner post. Where some of these, if you put them in, they have a tendency to fall over. Okay. Again, not a problem. You go out and you set it up again. But with these, one of the problems that my wife is the grass guru. So she's the one who's setting up the paddocks as we go out. She needs to be able to handle 20 or 25 of these posts and carry them, 20, 25? Yeah. So, and carry them along with a reel, okay? So she wants them to not be very heavy, okay? So that she can go out and all she's doing is stepping them in, walking 15 paces, stepping them in, walking 15 paces, and then our daughter walks behind her with a reel, okay, and this is poly twine, okay. Now this is a little bit heavier reel than what we have, okay. It feels very sturdy. Again, this is from Premier. Ours are a little bit lighter, which again is kind of nice, okay. But you want one that's sturdy. You don't want to get the ones from TSC or from those kinds of places.
That said, you don't want to over-tool yourself. Like, there's no point in getting the rhinoceros size thing when what you're running is sheep or little Dexters. Go with the smaller equipment, because you're going to be hauling this a lot of time and a long way.
This is what, so when I was growing up, we did kind of rotational grazing. My dad had what I was explaining, those rebar posts, but these were set up paddocks and he would move the cows between them with the wire. Very hard to change the shape of those paddocks, to take them down and set them up again. This has revolutionized rotational grazing, this poly twine. So it's just wire woven into this string, okay? And super easy to stretch across here. And then you make a loop, and you put your cows already in it, you make your loop, and then the cows stay in it, okay? And then what we do we'll be talking about paddocks in a little bit, every 24 hours, we are moving the cattle to a new paddock. Okay? And the dairy cows we're moving every 12 hours. They come in for milking, and we take them out to a new paddock. It takes my wife in the afternoon setting up a new paddock about...
I'm running 2 herds. The larger of the 2 herds is like 10 cow-calf pairs, and it might take 15 minutes, depending on what I'm moving.
So this is a really not
that includes
time-consuming
time to stop and observe animals and observe the grass and so forth.
Okay, in terms of chargers, they talk about the joule as being the amount of charge in it. Depends on what you have. We have a lot of 1 joules. We do have some 2 joule. I think we might even have a 3 joule. And that's when the sheep start getting out a little bit more, then we give them a good charge, and then they start staying in better. But you do not need a 50 joule or a 25 joule charger.
You might, depending on what you're keeping in. You keep buffalo, you might want those.
So another thing that we do is, so they say, and Joe may, if you had asked Joe about some things, so we have the solar chargers, and then we also have the chargers that run on wire. One of the things that they say is don't run along the extension cord to the box. Well, we run along the extension cord to the box. And we create these little outdoor boxes, okay, so that the charger sits inside of that. And then we have a ground rod that's permanently set. So I have about 6 of these scattered over the farm. So when we're ready to move to another section of the farm, we just take the charger and put it in another box, plug it in. We've got the ground rod already there. So these do need a ground rod as well. The solar charger that we carry has we just use a screw-in dog thing. Again, we're in wet climate, so it works better than in the drier climate. We've also heard that if you are in a dry climate, if you pour water on it sometimes, but it's the water going through the ground, so it may or may not be.
Joe in the next talk will be able to help people more with matching up their fence needs, their size of their farm, the kind of animals, and the charge they need.
I think that's it on questions. Yes.
What sort of exterior predator pressure do you guys have?
We have some coyotes, but they aren't bothering the cows. The sheep, the sheep. We have a pony that we keep with the sheep, and that seems to keep the coyotes away. With the chickens, we keep them primarily in a tractor or in netting. Okay, so netting, I think Joe will be bringing over the netting for that. So you can also use electric netting around them. We really like the tractors, and I'm not talking about chicken tractors, but we really like the tractors for moving chickens, and they're about a 10-foot by 4-foot tractor that we run the chickens in, and we're moving those again every 24 hours. And we're moving them through. Originally, we were moving them through grazing, maybe after the cows, but we said that's crazy. We don't need the fertility out there. So now we graze them in the garden. So the fallow gardens, the ones that we're not using, we're hitting really hard with the chickens, and then we'll switch over next year. We'll use those. So they're preparing beds and putting in fertility in the garden. Other questions about equipment? Come up afterwards and look at these different things. You know, some of these are kind of heavy for what we do. Again, we like the lighter kind. Some of them have metal posts on the bottom. Some of them have pigtails that you can only put them at one height. So there's lots of varieties of posts out there.
Figure to the 5 elements of the paddock.
Okay. So there are 5 elements to when we set up a paddock, there are 5 elements that we're trying to, as we leave the paddock, say, okay, do we have those 5 things?
Now that you've seen my beautiful artwork and got the basic idea, we'll go to that side.
Okay. So we have a forage in there, and we're going to talk about forage in there, but we're going to talk about each of these elements. So there should be forage in there. There should be water. We like to keep the water moving with them as opposed to having the cows go back. That changes a little bit depending on the season and things like that. But in the best of all possible worlds, the water is in the paddock with them. Some sort of mineral. What we use is a dolly, like a refrigerator dolly, turned on its side with a big PVC pipe in it. And that makes it very easy to move the salt and stuff to them. Shade or shelter. We find that really, with goats you might need a shelter. With cows you do not need a shelter. With sheep you do not need a shelter. But it is very helpful, somebody mentioned, to have these cows have shade. So we almost always include, especially if it's going to be very hot, somewhere where they can get back into the trees. Now we've got, up at the convent, we've got a donut. We've got the convent in the middle, we've got pasture on the outside, and then trees all the way around. So it's not hard for us to loop into the trees whenever we need to. And then the last thing is a hot fence. Make sure when you leave your fence that it's on, and that helps to make sure that the animals stay there.
They don't work. White string does not work very well to keep cows in unless it shocks them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about forages. people say, where can I graze? I don't have a good pasture. Oh, my place is a mess. First I'm going to have to mow it. I'm probably going to have to disc it and sow something. And the answer to all that is no. Like anywhere you have stuff growing on the ground, there's something that comes in and eats that. And there are, in the three main ruminants that Western people tend to raise, cows, sheep, and goats, almost anything you see out there is food for at least one of those, probably two, and often even three of them. So you can graze almost anywhere, just let it get some height before you start. Because the goal when you're done, right, is that it's been eaten, but it's also got trampled litter on top, right, and we're keeping the ground shaded and covered. The picture he showed where you could see dirt, that was what the convent looked like before we started working on it. And not a whole lot grows. You can see a lot of dirt. And as soon as the sun hits that and it starts to heat up, and that's doubly true here, everything in the ground, including the roots of those plants, but the fungus, the microbes, the worms, the bugs, everything either goes away or goes dormant. So you're trying to keep that ground covered. So before you graze anything, you want to let it get some height. Don't look at weeds and think that's a weed, that's not good to eat. Ragweed is like 35% protein at a certain point in its growth, in its lifespan. So everything is food for somebody. Everything's also doing something for that soil. Like if you guys get Canada thistle down here in patches and people just curse the stuff and tell you you're a bad neighbor if you don't spray it with Crossbow or Roundup or something. Thistles are actually good forage. You can actually train animals to eat it. Some of the ways people train animals to eat forages are, in my opinion, high risk. They'll go out there and spray them with a really tasty salt spray or a molasses spray. I would recommend that you not disguise a plant in order to get an animal to eat it. Because unless your ruminants have been living in a barn their entire lives, and so did their mamas, and they've been eating pelleted feed or sweet feed or chop or whatever forever, they have an internal sense about what they ought to eat. And, you know, if you give me a sugar-coated poison pill, I'm going to eat it because I like sugar, and then I'll be poisoned. And if you spray molasses on too much horse nettle and your animals get out there and eat a whole bunch of horse nettle, you may see some bad results. But when we create a small paddock and we say, okay guys, I'm coming back in 24 hours, and I'm going to give you as much as I think you will eat, poop on, or trample in that time. That includes a lot of stuff that an animal that's going out there with, say, 30 acres to pick from, he might ignore it, walk around and eat all the, say, medium red clover he can find, all the timothy he can find, and he might be leaving your ironweed and your ragweed and, you know, all your broadleaf forbs that look like weeds, and a lot of your other plants that aren't considered pasture plants, right? Now let's remember, the reason we want that diversity, one reason, is we've got all sizes, shapes, heights, and angles of leaves out there catching every possible photon. That's what nature wants to do, is catch that light energy. And so if there's light hitting the ground, something's going to try and grow there. And we're trying to encourage all that. When you see those, like, pastures made out of 3 or 4 or even 5 mixes, you're going to a very limited number of height, shape, sizes, etc., and you're missing a lot of the light you could be capturing. But when you shut an animal, shut a set of animals or an animal up in a certain size paddock, and very quickly you're going to learn to judge how big that paddock needs to be for the number of animals you're putting in and the amount of time you're going to leave them in there. I mean, we're not stupid, right? You put an animal in a small area and you come back after a little while and it's absolutely taken down to dirt. What do you do next time? You make it bigger. This is not anything you need a PhD for. This is just observational. So let's talk just for a minute about those weeds that people are going to scare you about. Right?
Okay, I'm going to stop for just a second. So this, I just want to give you this picture. This is a picture of Japanese knotweed, okay, which was an invasive. We bought a piece of property. We weren't sure what we were going to do with it. We put the sheep in it, and they just absolutely devoured it. So finding the right animal for the right forage is what you want to do. I'm just going to show them. This is a picture of some of the area that we have. So many of you may recognize a pasture like this. Pastures, we are not trying to make them rotationally graze on beautiful monocultures or anything like that. We're putting them in on what we have, and then you're matching that animal.
I will say, This is what it looked like before we grazed it,
Yes.
right? It looks a little better now.
And here's another picture of just weed forage stuff. So this is all of this is what you should be grazing.
Okay. So Sean pointed out you're matching your, do I say this or do you? Match your animals to your forage. Okay. So you're going to match your animal not only to your forage, so you're going to look out there what's growing. It's principally dewberries, right? And blackberries and spiny things and woody things. That's goat country. That's goat country, brush hog country, right? But if you're not going to go out there and brush hog it for a year before you put animals out there, that's goat country. Goats will do really well, whereas sheep will get snagged up in it. And a cow who carries her most tender parts underneath her doesn't want to shove herself in there. And a cow also noses after her food, so she don't want to scratch her face up. If you've got, so scratchy stuff, woody stuff tends to be more in the goat area. If you don't want to raise goats, if you say to yourself, but I'm going to raise Jersey cows. Yeah, well, to start with, you've got goat food. So a good place to start would be to feed the goats for a little while. In a couple of years, if you manage that grazing to kill what's there, this is the one case where we're going to say you're managing your plants to kill something or to at least reduce it. In the case of goats, you're managing to maybe to kill your briars, but you're growing grass underneath, right? In every other case where you're managing your sheep or you're managing your cows, you want what they're eating to come back, and so you're gonna hit it and give it a rest. But at any rate, goats, woody stuff, sheep. We got something that's full of. I'm going to say milkweed because we're going to talk about toxic forages in a minute. Milkweed and ironweed and ragweed and all the big sort of gnarly stuff that you think my cows don't want to eat that. That's good sheep territory, although you'd be surprised how many cows that eat it. Cows are more the grass and legumes and the softer stuff. We tend to expect cows put on a lot of muscle and make a lot of milk, so we're trying to feed them high protein stuff. Yes, sir. Goatweed. I think that must go by another name where I come from.
Provolone.
Say it again?
Provolone.
I don't know.
Sheep
Sheep one. So I'll say something. I would look up its profile because if it's not absolutely toxic, probably not meat it. But you will find that there are a lot of things out there. Animals are all different, and none of them read the textbooks. So you'll find there's a lot of stuff that's something will eat that you think. So your neighbor will tell you nothing will eat them, right? And then your animals will.
And then you find pigs will do it, or you'll find a different breed of goat that will eat it or something.
So I'm going to give you a general thought about toxic forages. I could go on for an hour just on toxic forages. First of all, we need to call them something else. Because toxic salt's toxic if you eat enough of it, right? The toxic things are only toxic in some parts, in some concentrations, some of the time, to some animals. The things we hear called toxic forages are toxic when animals are shut up with too much of it and too little of something else to eat, and they overdose on it. Every one of you have a toxic forage box in your house. It's called the medicine cabinet. And the reason you don't die